It is 1902. A young Italian man named Benito Mussolini moves to Switzerland to avoid joining the military. He gets deeply involved in socialism, writing for newspapers and working with trade unions. This causes problems with Swiss authorities. He gets arrested, sent back to Italy, returns to Switzerland, gets arrested again, and eventually ends up back in Italy where he completes his military service. After that, he becomes a well-known socialist voice in Italy. His writing and speaking skills make him famous. When W1 begins, Mussolini changes his position completely. He decides that war could create the conditions needed for a socialist revolution across Europe. His fellow socialists disagree with this new stance and remove him from the party. This rejection changes everything for Mussolini. He abandons socialism entirely and develops a new political idea. Instead of dividing people by class, he wants to unite them through national identity. He dreams of rebuilding Italy into a great empire, just like ancient Rome. He calls this idea fascism. Italy had fought on the winning side of W1, but received very little in return. The economy was weak and the government was unstable. People were frustrated and looking for strong leadership. Mussolini saw his opportunity. His movement grew rapidly. In 1922, he approached the King of Italy and essentially threatened to take power by force. The king gave him the position of prime minister without a fight. Mussolini slowly dismantled democracy and built a dictatorship around himself. Europe now had its first fascist dictator. Now Germany. Germany had lost W1 and was punished severely through the Treaty of Versailles. The country lost territory, was forced to reduce its military to almost nothing, was banned from having an air force, and was required to pay enormous amounts of money to the Allied nations. The German people felt humiliated and betrayed. The economy collapsed, the government was weak, people were desperate. Into this situation came Adolf Hitler. He had served as a soldier in W1 and was deeply angry about Germany's defeat. He helped build a new political party, and in 1923 attempted to seize power through a march in Munich. He failed and was arrested. But his popularity continued to grow. By 1933, the president of Germany appointed him as chancellor. Hitler believed he was destined to save Germany. He quickly established a dictatorship with himself at the center. Europe now had its second fascist dictator. Hitler and Mussolini shared similar beliefs and the same enemies. They began building a relationship. Meanwhile, Japan had spent over 200 years isolated from the rest of the world. When Western powers forced Japan to open its borders for trade, they imposed unfair treaties that damaged the Japanese economy. Japan had no natural resources of its own, so it decided to take them from other countries. Japan went to war with China, took territory, and expanded its influence across Asia. When the West objected, Japan felt it was being treated unfairly since Western powers had done the same thing to weaker nations. Japan went to war with Russia and won, then annexed Korea and continued expanding throughout the region. Now three powers, Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan, all believed they were superior nations with the right to expand. All three had hostility toward the Allied powers, and all three were preparing for more conquest. Hitler began dismantling the Treaty of Versailles piece by piece. He rebuilt the German Air Force, reintroduced military service, and expanded the army, all in direct violation of the treaty. The Allied nations did nothing. He then sent troops back into the Rhineland, a region that was supposed to remain free of German military presence. He privately ordered his commanders to retreat immediately if the Allies responded. The Allies did nothing again. Feeling confident, Hitler moved to his next goal. He wanted to expand German territory to increase the population and power of what he called the Aryan race. He began looking at neighboring countries. The Allied nations, mainly Britain and France, finally grew concerned. But instead of confronting Hitler directly, they adopted a strategy called appeasement. The idea was to give Hitler small concessions to avoid a larger conflict. This strategy worked like this. Hitler demanded something. The Allies refused briefly, then gave it to him and told him not to ask for anything more. Then Hitler demanded something else, and the cycle repeated. In 1938, German troops marched into Austria and took control without any resistance. Shortly after, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large German-speaking population. British and French leaders met with Hitler in Munich. Without even inviting Czechoslovakia to the meeting, they agreed to hand over the territory. British Prime Minister Chamberlain returned home believing he had secured peace. He waived the signed agreement and declared the crisis over. Within months, Hitler invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia anyway. Mussolini also wanted to expand. Italy invaded Ethiopia, a country so poorly equipped that soldiers were defending themselves against modern tanks with traditional weapons. Italy then occupied Albania to control access to the Adriatic Sea. Japan, meanwhile, launched a major invasion of China following a confrontation at the Marco Polo Bridge. Japanese forces swept through major Chinese cities and committed horrific atrocities against the Chinese population. Germany and Italy formalized their alliance by signing the Pact of Steel. Hitler then turned his attention to Poland, specifically the Polish Corridor, a strip of land that divided Germany into two separate parts. Britain and France warned Hitler clearly. If Germany invaded Poland, there would be war. Hitler did not want to fight on two fronts, so he made a secret agreement with Soviet leader Stalin. They agreed to divide Poland between themselves. The announcement of this agreement shocked the entire Western world. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the west. The Soviet Union invaded from the east. Poland fought back hard but could not hold against both powers simultaneously. Britain and France declared war on Germany. What followed was a strange period called the Phony War. Despite the declaration of war, very little actual fighting took place. France launched a small operation into German territory, then pulled back and took up defensive positions. French military thinking was still stuck in the previous war. They relied on horses, used motorcycles to deliver messages instead of radios, and built their defenses along the German border without extending them all the way to the English Channel. Britain was not performing much better. Chamberlain still hoped the conflict could be resolved through diplomacy. Instead of bombing campaigns, the Royal Air Force flew over German cities and dropped leaflets. One senior officer noted that this probably just gave Germany a supply of paper products for the rest of the war. Both nations wanted to avoid the massive casualties of W1. Their strategy was to keep the fighting away from home. Their attention turned to Norway. Sweden was selling iron ore to Germany, and the shipments passed through Norwegian waters. The Allies asked Norway and Sweden to stop. Both countries refused. The Soviet Union then attacked Finland, which gave the Allies an idea. They proposed landing troops in Norway and moving them through Sweden, supposedly to help Finland, but also to take control of the iron ore fields along the way. Norway and Sweden refused this as well. Britain then began mining Norwegian waters to disrupt German supply ships. Hitler understood what was happening and moved quickly. Germany invaded Denmark and then Norway. The Allies tried to land troops at Norwegian ports, but Germany had already secured the airfields and used air power to force the Allies to withdraw. After this failure, Chamberlain resigned. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of Britain. It's the end of Part 1.